Picture this. You're a leader facing a critical decision, the clock is ticking, and everyone's looking to you for answers. But what if the strongest leadership isn't about having all the answers? Today, we're diving deep into Sikh Decision Authority, a fascinating approach that's turning traditional leadership on its head. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how truth, humility, and collective conscience can transform the way we think about power and decision-making. I'm really excited to explore this topic with you. Can you start by helping us understand what Sikh Decision Authority actually is?
Well, it's actually easier to start with what it isn't. You see, Sikh Decision Authority isn't about position, title, or seniority. It's not granted by hierarchy or force of personality. Instead, it begins with responsibility. In Sikh tradition, authority is treated as a weight leaders must carry carefully, not a right they can claim freely.
That's fascinating. So it's almost like flipping the traditional power dynamic on its head?
Exactly. Think of it this way. In many leadership settings, decisions start with personal will. What do I want? What do I think is best? But Sikh Decision Authority asks a different question. What does the situation require?
That's such a profound shift in perspective. But how does this work in practice, especially when you're under pressure?
That's where it gets really interesting. Sikh Decision Authority doesn't wait for perfect clarity. Leaders accept uncertainty without surrendering accountability.
Wait, how do you balance that? Accepting uncertainty while maintaining accountability seems like a really tricky line to walk.
The key is understanding that truth, not certainty, is the final arbiter. Truth isn't something a leader possesses or uses to win arguments. It's more like a compass that keeps authority aligned.
So it's not about being right all the time?
Not at all. In fact, treating truth as the final arbiter actually changes how we handle disagreement. When truth is understood as alignment rather than ownership, dissent becomes a source of clarity rather than a threat.
That's really powerful. You know, it reminds me of how some modern companies are rethinking their decision-making processes.
Yes, and there's actually a fascinating parallel here with the Sikh concept of Sarbat Khalsa, collective deliberation undertaken for the good of the whole.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, in Sikh tradition, conscience is held collectively, not privately. Even when a single person decides, they remain answerable to the whole.
But doesn't that slow everything down? In today's fast-paced world, leaders often need to make quick decisions.
That's a common misconception. Collective conscience doesn't mean consensus without leadership. Leaders still make clear decisions, they just do so with awareness of shared impact and dignity.
You mentioned humility earlier. How does that fit into all this?
This is one of the most misunderstood aspects. Many leaders think of humility as a personality trait, being soft-spoken or hesitant. But in Sikh Decision Authority, humility is a discipline that shapes how authority operates. It's about constraining ego so decisions remain anchored in responsibility rather than self-protection.
That's such a different way of thinking about humility. It's almost like a strength rather than a weakness.
Exactly. And here's what's fascinating. When leaders release the need to defend image or certainty, they actually respond more clearly to changing conditions.
So it's almost like letting go of control gives you more real authority?
Yes, but it's important to understand this isn't about being passive. Sikh Decision Authority doesn't avoid hard choices or defer endlessly to consensus.
Let's talk about pressure. How does this approach hold up when stakes are high and time is short?
That's when it becomes most crucial. Under pressure, many leaders either overreach to regain control or delay to avoid visible risk. Sikh Decision Authority resists both impulses. It favors steady alignment over speed for its own sake, while still recognizing the cost of inaction.
You know, that reminds me of how we all face pressure in daily decisions, even if we're not in formal leadership positions.
Absolutely. And that's why this approach is so relevant. It's about how we carry responsibility in any context, not just formal leadership roles.
Let's talk about when things go wrong. How does this approach handle accountability?
This is crucial. Sikh Decision Authority separates responsibility from blame. Leaders own decisions openly, without dramatizing success or deflecting failure.
That sounds challenging. How do you maintain that kind of openness when things aren't going well?
It comes back to that foundation of truth over certainty. When leaders aren't trying to prove they're always right, they can examine what occurred and adjust course without losing credibility.
You mentioned earlier about deciding alone versus together. How do you know which approach to take?
Sikh Decision Authority treats participation as context-dependent. Leaders decide alone when responsibility cannot be shared, and together when collective insight strengthens alignment.
But how do you maintain clear accountability when decisions are shared?
The key is understanding that shared discernment doesn't dissolve responsibility. Leaders can invite perspective and welcome challenge while still maintaining clear ownership of the final decision.
That's fascinating. What are some common ways this gets distorted in practice?
One common distortion is treating authority as entitlement. Leaders begin to equate their role with personal right rather than responsibility. Another is replacing authority with control, acting quickly to project decisiveness, but letting speed substitute for alignment.
Those sound like such easy traps to fall into. How do you guard against them?
It comes back to that disciplined humility we discussed. When leaders regularly examine their decisions for alignment rather than just outcomes, these distortions become easier to spot.
Let's talk about modern contexts. How does this translate to today's fast-paced, complex organizations?
That's where this approach becomes even more valuable. Modern leadership unfolds within speed, complexity, and constant scrutiny. Sikh Decision Authority offers a way to remain grounded without withdrawing from responsibility. Leaders can act with steadiness when systems move quickly.
Does this require everyone in the organization to understand or buy into these principles?
No, and that's important. It doesn't require shared belief. Instead, it emphasizes conduct that others can recognize as fair, consistent, and principled.
That's really powerful. It's about behavior rather than belief systems.
Exactly. Authority earns trust through behavior rather than explanation. It becomes visible through outcomes and relationships.
As we wrap up, what would you say is the most counterintuitive aspect of this approach?
I think it's the idea that releasing the need for certainty actually strengthens leadership. It seems paradoxical, but it's true.
Can you explain that a bit more?
When leaders accept that they don't need to be right all the time, they become more open to correction, more aligned with truth, and ultimately more trustworthy.
That's such a powerful insight. Any final thoughts as we close?
Yes, remember that authority isn't something leaders wield with force, but something they carry with care. When aligned with truth and responsibility, it becomes both stronger and gentler.
So when you step back from everything we've discussed today, what this really comes down to is transforming how we think about power itself.
Exactly. It's about moving from control to alignment, from certainty to truth, from position to responsibility.
And that shift changes everything: how we decide, how we lead, how we respond to pressure.
And most importantly, it creates leadership that endures because it's grounded in something larger than individual will or position.
Remember, the strongest authority might not be the one that never doubts, but the one that stays aligned with truth, even in uncertainty.